Hello there and welcome back. Now that we have begun the process of looking at business communication, it's fair to say that we need to take a look at the styles of communication that we use ourselves. And as I mentioned before, once you begin to know exactly what kind of style you use to communicate, you can understand people much, much better. And you can see where problems lie and how to improve your communication skills. Let's take a look at the two dimensions to communication. If we have a look at our slide, we can see that there are two dimensions here. The horizontal line represents the dimension indirectness to directness. And we also see that there is a vertical line representing supporting to controlling. I'll just go on to explain these a little bit further. Basically, dimension 1 is directness to, or versus indirectness, and this horizontal line describes a person's observable behavior. It's the way that they actually influence and express their feelings and thoughts and ideas to others. So we can see that people can go from being indirect in expressing themselves to being very direct in expressing themselves and influencing other people. As we look at the vertical line, which is supporting to controlling, or supporting versus controlling, this explains the motivation behind our actions. It means, are we motivated to put relationships above other things, above all else as a priority in the way we deal and communicate with people? Or do we tend to control the way that we deal with people by prioritizing tasks at hand? This vertical line shows supporting versus controlling. It explains the motivation behind our actions. It explains that supporting people tend to put relationships first. Relationships with others are a chief priority. Controlling people, on the other hand, are people who prioritize the accomplishment of the task at hand. And so the task becomes the priority. So we see along the bottom of this graph, we have influence, which represents the horizontal line, indirectness versus directness. And then we have the vertical line represented by relations and then task. And supporting people are more relationship-oriented, controlling people are more task-oriented. So basically this begins to describe how we view communications. And we're going to find out more about ourselves. You're going to find out more about yourself and the way you deal with people. Let's take a look at direct people. Now, you may find that you think that you're fairly direct in the way that you try to explain yourself and the way that you communicate and influence others. So, some of the characteristics we can see of direct people are, first up, that they are quite fast-paced, that they do things rather quickly. They have a take-charge attitude, and they're quite assertive in their nature, quite firm to stand up for their beliefs and their opinions. They have no problem with that. As we go through this, why don't you just either tick beside the box or the point that we're raising as to whether this does apply to you, and see what you come up with at the end as we continue the program. Typical direct people also are a little bit forceful in nature. They tend to confront conflict rather than run away from conflict, and they don't mind looking at change or understanding change or dealing with change. They tend to be quite challenging, and they don't mind taking risks and making decisions head on. That means they have no fear of doing these activities. They are, of course, known a little bit to be outspoken communicators. They do tend to take the limelight and control the stage, so to speak. They do like to express themselves very verbally and very, very openly and directly. Another nature that they have is that they do like to compete as well. They are a bit impatient and they want to get up and do things. And they tend to, in some ways, bulldoze their way through life, meaning that they take things on head on. They rush perhaps a little to do things, and they're very, very forthright and dedicated in what they do. Does it sound like you? Is this the way that you tend to communicate, not only in business, but think of the instances around you in your personal life and your private life as well? Other characteristics of direct people are that they are confident, very, very confident. And they can maintain strong eye contact when they meet other people. They're not afraid to look at others and to have a firm handshake right up front. They're quite quick to do that. They tend to thrive on achievement, and achievement's very important to them. They want to get things done, and sometimes they don't really want to be bothered with the rules and the policies that crop up. Those sorts of things are secondary to them. Sometimes that might get you into trouble if you do behave this way, if this is the way you communicate or the way that you go about your actions. A direct person tends to think that it's easier to ask or to say sorry rather than to ask for permission. They don't really like asking for permission to do things. They want to get in there straight away and get things moving. And because of this nature that they do have, they tend to speak loudly and sometimes in quite aggressive tones. And many people do say that they look rather bold. Their appearance, or their visual appearance, is quite bold in some ways. A little bit uncertain. You might look at them and you sort of are a little bit concerned about the way that they look, for example. Anyway, there are direct people who influence others, who express their feelings in this very direct way. They may seem hasty to you. They may seem that they want to have a bit of a fight. It may look like they actually are not concerned with the feelings of other people, and that they can be quite impatient and dominant. However, they do seem dedicated because they're out there doing what they really believe in, and they're very, very determined. They're energetic, active action people. So this dimension, this describes directness and the way that you channel your energy, channel your feelings, your thoughts, your expectations, and how you influence other people in a very direct way. Is that you? Start thinking about yourself and look at the characteristics as we do go through this program. Maybe you might find that you are a little bit shocked, that you are a little bit concerned about your behavior. Anyway, this is you. So let's take a look a little bit further at the other end of the horizontal dimension there. As we see, we have just talked about directness. Now we are going to talk about indirectness. Typically, indirect people are cautious in their approach to risk and their decision making and changes that come along in business. They seem to be quite the opposite, at the other end of the spectrum of the direct behavior. They tend to be more slow-paced, a little bit more low-key, and perhaps we could say a little bit more meek and harmonious, not so over-verbal about things. They do prefer to have a bit more harmony in the way that they go about influencing and communicating with others. Sometimes they may, however, be a little bit slow to take up the initiatives at social gatherings, be perhaps a little bit quiet and stand behind the scenes, so to speak, rather than their colleagues at the other end of the dimension, which is very direct and fast-paced. Indirect people, and try to think of your colleagues and the people around you as we do this. Indirect people, they tend to be quite reserved negotiators. And sometimes, if they go to the extreme, they may hesitate to contribute in meetings. Rather reserved and conservative and quiet. But this, of course, depends on the different levels. There are different levels as we talk about this, from the directness through to the indirectness on this dimension. It could be said also that one of the characteristics of indirect people is that they are conflict avoiders and are more diplomatic and patient rather than confronting conflict straight up and head on like their friends in the direct end of the dimension. Remember, we talked about international communications and particularly people from the UK. In business, there's a lot of diplomacy in the language and the style of management. So start to think about the people that you're meeting and the people you know, and indeed yourself, as to whether these characteristics do apply to you. Sometimes, if there is an important issue as well, strongly indirect people tend to conform rather than argue. But when they do have strong convictions and beliefs about an issue, they will stand their ground. That's most certain about them. They may be seen as low profile and gentle and quite reserved. And even their physical way of handshaking perhaps is softer, gentler, and tone of voice and volume is lower, and perhaps the way that they speak is a little bit slower than the more direct person at the other end of the dimension. So you can see that there are certain opposites developing here in the behaviors, but there are degrees and along the dimension of directness and indirectness. They are very conservative generally and reserved in their visual appearance, as you may meet them in business circles. Sometimes they may not make very qualified statements as such. They're quite reserved and quiet in the way that they state their issues. Is this you, perhaps? Perhaps you find that you are not direct, but you are more indirect in the way that you influence others, in the way that you argue, in the way that you confront issues and communicate. So we can see that there are different levels of directness and indirectness along the dimension. Let's take a look here now at how this would be verbalized, direct and indirect. Let's say, for example, an indirect person would ask, "Would you like to sit down?" A direct person would tell, "Have a seat," or "Sit down." These are the differences that you will find becoming visible as you get to know the behaviors and the different ways of communication styles with different people. An indirect person tends more to listen, whereas a direct person tends more to talk rather than listen. An indirect person keeps his opinions and waits for the right moment to be able to express those opinions. A direct person is rather more eager to express his opinions quite readily, quite quickly. And an indirect person, as we can see here, has quite a low quantity of verbal communication, meaning that they're not great talkers. They would keep quiet and listen, so there's not a lot of talking going on from them. Whereas the direct person tends to have lots of verbal communications, lots of calls, lots of meetings, lots of chances and opportunities to speak at engagements, etc. So we do see here in the verbal side of communication the differences. And the differences should be very clear to you. Please start to take note of how you fit in when we talk about the differences between direct and indirectness. Let's take a look at vocal. How the sound feels or how the sound appears. Not necessarily the words, but how the sounds might appear vocally. Briefly, an indirect person is rather steady the way that they speak, with a more even delivery of their voice. Now remember here we're talking about the voice, okay? A direct person, however, has much more variety in the voice. Perhaps more ups and downs, more colour in the voice. An indirect person is less forceful. A direct person is much more forceful with their voice, the way they use their sound. Indirect, yes, again, a lower volume, and we can say slower speech patterns. It doesn't mean that they're speaking in slow motion at all, but it does mean that they have a calmer way of using their speech. They have a slower pattern of speech, and that is just a reflection of their indirectness when it comes to communication. The direct communicator, however, is highly vocal, as we can see, with high volume and faster speech patterns. They tend to rush their words, they tend to be quicker, trying to get out all the words, not in an extreme sense, but they're very, very vocal and they want to express themselves quite quickly. So we can see that there are differences, not only with the words that are said and the way that they're said, but in the voice itself and the pattern of speech. And then we move on to the visual side, briefly between direct people and indirect people. How do they look? Okay, and how do they behave? What do we see? So we see with indirect people that there are gentle handshakes. A gentle handshake, and opposed to their direct friends, there is a firm handshake. So there are two differences here. An indirect person will also be more likely to use intermittent eye contact, meaning that they're not gazing totally and steadily all the time at you. They may move their eyes away, they may look at papers and then come back to you, or look somewhere else in the room and come back to you. Whereas a direct person will tend to give you a more steady gaze with their eyes. This is where they're showing their confidence and their ability to take on challenges and risks, etc. So they're not afraid to give that more steady, constant gaze. In terms of gestures to emphasize points, you will find an indirect person will not use a lot of gestures. Their arms will be rather calm, their hand movements will be rather calm. And they will also show a certain level of patience about them when they're in the communication process. However, switching to our direct friends, gestures are used quite frequently to emphasize points. Not overly, but frequently, as main points of emphasis. And sometimes, unfortunately, the direct person, when they're communicating, will display a certain level of impatience. This is the nature. This is their nature. So this is how they behave and how they demonstrate their influencing ability and communication styles. So, do you see yourself? Do you see the visual, the vocal, and the verbal part of you? Are you tending more to be direct in the way that you influence people, or are you somewhere halfway along this horizontal line here, the horizontal dimension? Are you tending more to be indirect? There will be certain levels of directness and indirectness depending on how you know yourself and what you know about you. You may be highly, strongly direct, or you may be halfway or a third of the way towards indirectness. So it can be dependent totally upon the nature of yourself. Let's take a look now at the other vertical dimension. And we'll move on to supporting people. And as these dimensions imply, supporting people do tend to be more relationship-oriented. In this dimension, we explore what is behind the thinking, what are the goals, what are the motivations of the behaviors of supporting people. And here we see that supporting people are generally emotionally open, and they have quite animated facial expressions where you can see quite easily what they're thinking, whether they're happy, whether they're sad. It's quite an easy thing to see. So they also, with this, bring along physical gestures that go hand in hand with their animated facial expressions. Supporting people feel comfortable expressing joy, sadness and confusion. They have no problem with that. They're quite open. Their faces are open and their emotions are open to expression. They do tend to be what we say huggers and handshakers and touchers. You may find that you know people who like to touch you on the shoulder perhaps, or hold your hand, or when they shake your hand they hold it for some time, or they hug you when they see you. Or you may see people who behave that way. Well, those sorts of people are more your supporting people who demonstrate the way that they deal with other people and communicate through building relations, and they value people. Supporting people tend to be informal, and they prefer to be relaxed and have warm relationships. They don't really like confrontation very much. Maybe that could be seen as a weakness in business. You have to be careful of these things. You do have to confront certain issues, but it depends on what level of the line you may fall, what measure you may have of yourself in this supporting role. Supporting people again, and I ask you, please do think, are you a supporting person? Supporting people enjoy amusing conversations, frequently tell stories, and often embarrassing things. They're very warm. They're not ashamed or not embarrassed to say and speak their mind, and are great conversationalists. They are seldom disturbed when other people waste their time. They are fairly tolerant, we would say. Maybe sometimes they might be too tolerant, perhaps, but they prefer unstructured time, meaning they're not watching the minutes by the minute, calculating them every hour. So they're quite loose and quite fluid when it comes to time. They are prepared to rearrange their schedules according to the needs of people first and tasks later. They're also quite flexible about others' time also. They're also quite flexible. So rearranging schedules with supporting people, they don't get hot-headed, they don't get argumentative. They are quite willing to see how they can work something out with you. So are you a supporting person? Start to think of yourself in this role. Is that where you fit in? A few more characteristics. We can say that supporting people are highly motivated by relationships and feelings. It's very important to them to have these feelings and to have good relationships, and they really do have a great impact on the way that they behave and the way that they communicate. They want to get to know people, and sometimes they base their decisions purely on the relationships they have and the experiences of those people that they're dealing with. They're very feely, touchy people, supporting people. Emotionally open, they show it by using body language, and their vocal inflections are very, very colourful. They like to have eye contact, and they communicate very, very easily what they are feeling to others. I know many supporting people, and in some ways I myself am a supporting person. When we have a look further on the graph there, you'll start to see that you will have a certain level of directness and indirectness, and you will also have a certain level of what is on the vertical line as well. So supporting people are actually a joy to be around. They make conversations enjoyable. They sometimes like to discuss personal things, and sometimes that's okay. They may seem a little bit unreliable, however, sometimes, and they show low concentration depending on who is in control. So they're very much an affective nature, a very emotional nature, and a very people person. So we see relations are important. And depending on the scale of things, where you might fall in terms of supporting down towards controlling, relationships will be important as on a sliding scale. Let's take a look now at controlling people. Sometimes we say that controlling people are more concerned with the task than the people that they're talking to, and so that they keep their emotions inside themselves. They don't really like to let out emotions so easily. And because of this, they tend to have a look on their face which is sort of emotionless. We call it a poker face. So you never know what they're thinking. You never know what they're going to do. It's quite a face without emotion. In some ways, they are a little bit more rigid physically, and they're less expressive than supporting people. They're quite controlled. They tend to keep a little bit distant, perhaps, from others as well. Not totally so, but not as huggy and as touchy as supporting people. They seldom lose control, which is actually a very good thing. They tend to have a certain level of self-control, which is very good in certain situations. So they're rather controlled physically, and they rather guard their emotions. They don't like to have digressions from their agendas as well. They're very task-oriented. So they are purely wanting to complete the task at hand and put a lot of emphasis actually on completing that task rather than building relationships. They are quick to make decisions. They want facts as well. They don't want emotions to override what should happen. They want to see statistics and hard evidence. And in some ways, because of their nature, they like to work alone. They don't put very much value on opinions and feelings. They put a lot of value on facts and figures and statistics. And they are, in some ways, more comfortable operating at an intellectual level. They do like to discuss things with those who they feel have knowledge, and they are not certainly going to discuss things of a silly nature. They want to see a rhyme and a reason for their discussion. They are very organized. They are efficiency experts of the world and can stick to schedules and rigid plans. Unlike supporting people, controlling people don't like to change their schedules. They like to keep to their schedules. Is that you? Is this the nature that you have? Please start to think about yourself and think about those around you that you're dealing with as to where they fit into in these dimensions. Once you begin to know yourself, you will certainly begin to know others. So a controlling person, summing up, really does like to accomplish goals. They tend to stay away from other people while they're working, so they actually can dedicate time to accomplishing those goals. And they have a strong personal sense of their own work area. Where they are sitting, where they are actually working, is very important to them. It's their own territory. So this is something that is very valuable to them, so they can actually perform their tasks. They are not overly vocal like your supporting people. They are rather restricted in terms of their verbal and their vocal and visual expression. So we can say that they stick to a very strong agenda. They concentrate on business and keep things private. They prefer working with things or through people rather than with people or for people. They're not really people-oriented, they're task-oriented people. People are there, of course, and they will deal with them, but their main priority is to get the job done. Sometimes, we may feel that controlling people are rather coercive and authoritative and don't really care about their staff. That may not be very true. It's just the nature of the person, and they feel that their main objective is to complete the task. However, it can sometimes cause friction if they're interested only with how they use other people's time and how people can achieve things rather than being interested in the people, then that sometimes is not a very good thing. So let's take a look at these two dimensions one more time. We have indirectness and directness. Where do you fit on that level? We have supporting and controlling dimension. The supporting and controlling dimension, where do you fit there? Are you a supporting person or are you more a controlling person? Are relationships important to you or are tasks important to you? So let's take a look at yourself. Self-assessment is a very good way for you to begin to understand the things that you need to improve. There are many assessments that you can do to measure certain levels of whatever it is that you want to measure. There are many assessments that do that. But in this program, we are just going to walk through and talk through the first steps one at a time as to how you can begin to know yourself. As we've explained, the two dimensions, directness, indirectness, supporting and controlling. Where do you think you fall? So first, let's look at this. Are you more direct or indirect? Next, are you more supporting or controlling? You know you. You know yourself. By now, with the explanations that I've just given to you, you should be starting to see who you are and to see what kind of nature you have when it comes to dealing with other people, when it comes to what motivates you and keeps you going. Next part of this exercise. Think of a difficult person with whom you would like to communicate better. Think of a difficult person. Now, we all have difficult people in our lives that we have to contend with. And indeed, we have difficult people in business. Nothing is ever easy. We can't handpick the people that we work with. So there you go. We do have difficult people around us. So think of a difficult person. It could be that it's your boss. It could be that it's one of your colleagues. It could be that it's your subordinate who's heading up a project team. And this difficult person is someone actually that you would like to communicate better with. So now that you know who that person is, next up, what is the source of the difficulty? Have you really sat down and thought about it? Is it that they are the opposite to you? Is that what the difficulty is? The difference of personal styles? What is it that is causing your difficulties? Start to think of these things. And once you begin to think of them, go back and go through the different styles on these two dimensions that we've looked at. Directness versus indirectness. Supporting versus controlling. Each of us has some of this in us, and it varies according to who we are. And not only each of us, but each of your subordinates, your bosses, everyone around you is also human, and they too have different levels of these styles within them. So once you can begin to assess yourself, and second up, then begin to think of someone that you'd like to have better communications with, take that as an activity that you should sit down and work on in your own private time. Make a goal for yourself that from tomorrow that you are going to start to try to communicate better with that person, knowing now what you know. Knowing now the different characteristics of people and what they think or how they behave differently, and see how you can try to come to some solutions about how you can work together. Being open to different styles is one of the qualities of a very good manager, and a very effective manager indeed. And it's important to know which personal style best describes you and the other people you need to communicate with. This is an important step in analysing and improving your skills. You can't do it unless you know this. You can't pull out of a hat something that's magical, that's going to cure your problems. You're going to have to learn about yourself and learn about others. Each personal style that we've looked at, each type, direct, indirect, supporting, controlling, each type has a different way of perceiving the world, of looking at how things are going. And they have a different way of behaving and communicating. So the idea is to learn to understand that. You may not accept it because it's different to you, but the thing is to learn to understand that there are differences, and that you have to reach people through understanding their differences. This is what business communication is about. Understanding the differences that are in people, understanding the differences between different cultures, as we've already gone through in this program. So there are different styles that come out of the two dimensions that we have discussed and gone through. In this graph, we can see that there are 4 behavioral styles now. And they are made up of either a bit of indirect and direct, plus supporting and controlling. So we have 4 styles, and I will go through these to indicate to you the differences between them. If you find that you are more tipping towards the left side of this graph or the right side of this graph, then you will find that you are either slow-paced or you are fast-paced. You are either side of the vertical line, mostly. If you are above the horizontal line, you might find that you are more relationship-oriented. Into the supporting and controlling, you would be task-oriented. So we are going to go through these styles so you can clearly understand the way that you communicate and why you communicate the way you do. The socializer. As we can see, the socializer is partly supporting and partly direct, meaning that they are friendly and enthusiastic action people. Being direct is important, but also being supportive and supporting with others around them is important as well. They like to be admired and have compliments paid to them, and in many ways they tend to place more priority and have fun in life in doing the tasks they have to achieve. They want to enjoy what they do. This is very important for them. They have the ability to influence with great persuasion. As you can see, they are direct, but direct with a very people-oriented aspect, heavily people-oriented directness. So people are important, and they influence with great, great persuasion. They need to have people around them. This is their main thing. People are important to them. So for them to be effective, they need people and they need to have interaction and contact with people. If you locked a socializer away in a room by themselves, they would simply die because there's no interaction, there's no people to talk to or to be involved with. They do tend to base a lot of the risks and decisions they make on intuition. They're a very feeling person, as we know. Supporting people are very feeling people. And sometimes they act and decide very, very quickly. They're concerned with the way things look, and they think emotionally. Sometimes that is good, but if it's not defined clearly and well enough or thought through well enough, socializers can end up in trouble. They do think about the big picture more than the fine print. They get bored with the details. They get bored with all those little words and all these tiny things they've got to do. They're big picture people. So think about it. Is this you? Are you a socializer? Are you supporting as well as direct? Is this the type that you are? Do you like changes? Do you like to be innovative? Do you like to run away from conflict? I think most socializers dislike conflict. They may not run away from it, but they don't like to have to confront it. They do, however, maintain a very positive and optimistic outlook on life. This is one of their key attributes. Being the supportive, very emotive people that they are very optimistic and direct in that optimism. They want to let everybody know about that. Sometimes, however, they may exaggerate and generalize things because they're just so enthusiastic to get information out. And they tend to dream and get others caught up in their dreams. This is their optimism and enthusiasm coming out in great leaps and bounds. And finally, we can sum up that sometimes the socializer jumps from one activity to the next. They perhaps work quickly and rather excitedly. So instead of maintaining a certain calmness about themselves, as with direct people, they're very flighty, they're very excitable and easy to move on from one thing to the next. They may be a little bit disorganized in things, but they are very touchy people and highly motivated. If you wish to know how to keep a balance, if you are a socializer, in order to be able to balance themselves or balance yourself, you need to control your time and emotions a bit more. And to be a bit more objective, concentrating on the task. It's all very well to be relationship oriented, but if you are totally that way, then you won't achieve anything at all. So the thing is to find the balance. Start to take more logical approaches to projects. This is how you can find the balance. Of course, be who you are. However, remember that in business and in management and indeed in communicating to others, you need to find that balance. Spending more time with checking and verifying and specifying things is a way also to start to bring you back to find the balance and not to be torn away, taken away, swept away by all the emotions of your nature. So we see the socializer, direct and supporting, highly relationship oriented, highly caring for people, depending on the level of yourself or how you view the measure of that person. So directness and relationship orientation brings about the socializer style. Is that you? Think about it. Next we come to the director. The directors are, as we can see on the graph, they are direct and controlling. Now here we see also the level of directness, directedness. But also we see that they are very much people who want to take charge of situations. They're controlling people. They are firm in their relationships with others, and they are highly oriented towards productivity and goals. They're concerned about the bottom line, and these are good people to have around. Very dedicated to getting the task done. The task in hand will be completed by directors, that is absolutely sure, perhaps more so than your socializers. They may seem tough and impatient at times and even a little bit stubborn, but that is their nature. The director, of course, needs to be in charge. They really do need to have the controlling, take charge component, and they don't really like to have others to be in charge of them. They are the ones who need to be in charge. They like to act quickly and decisively, bringing decisions to the forefront in a very short space of time. Is that you? Are you a director? Start to think as we go along. Do you think logically? Are you power-oriented? If you do, then you are a director. You are very much controlling and direct in the way that you approach things. And you want facts and highlights. It sometimes can be said, that directors are workaholics. They take everything home. They never leave the office. They've always got their computer on up here. It's never turned off. They're always thinking of things and ways to achieve results. They do need, however, to have some personal freedom to manage themselves and others. They don't like to be controlled as to how they manage other people. And the director does like changes. He gets bored very easily with the sameness of things. He prefers to delegate tasks so he can have other people reach those tasks. Not only he is working on tasks, but other people are working with him. He's very task-oriented. Unfortunately, he does have a low tolerance for feelings and attitudes and advice of others. This is possibly a downside to the director. Because he has more of a controlling dimension to him, he is less of a relationship-oriented person. So people are really not what he's interested in. They are there, but he's more involved with the task. And sometimes that does give the impression that he's not really concerned with his staff, or he's not really interested in people's feelings and the attitudes and advice of other people. Being results-oriented, it's important that they are recognized for their accomplishments. So the director definitely needs to have praise and definitely needs to have acknowledgement of the work that he has undertaken, and the work of his team as well. Now, let's be careful here too. Don't forget that being direct and being controlling is a combination whereby the director may engage in arguments and conflict quite easily. They are quite precise and efficient, but they do have a tendency to argue. Is that you? Think about it. However, directors have great skills, task-oriented people with great administrative skills, and if you want to know how to create a balance or how to achieve a balance of your directedness and your controllingness, then it may be important that you need to learn active listening and patience. These are the areas that you would need to improve upon so you can find a balance with those two types. Also, becoming a little bit more sensitive to things around you and having a little bit more humility with others. Teamwork will help you here. Push yourself to be involved in teamwork, to find more balance. You need to get some team-oriented things going and to show concern for others. And in that way, you will be able to project a more relaxed image amongst your staff and your colleagues, of course. So as I'm going through this, just remember that each of the styles, each of the types, the socializer, which we have done, and now the director, which we have done, both of these areas will have a need to find balance, because unless you are perfectly in tune with both of the dimensions in those styles, then there needs to be improvement. So finding balance is important, and as we go through these things, make a note of how you can find balance if you consider that for now you are a director. As we see the director style, fast-paced, task-oriented. So the relationship area, the slow-paced, are not with you. Therefore, it may mean that if you need to communicate and be active in your business, you may need to find that balance, as we say, to work with others. Now we're moving on to the third type here, and this is the thinker. Here we find the thinker. Thinkers are both indirect and controlling. Indirect and controlling. Now what combination does that bring us? What kind of characteristics? We can see that they are more analytical and perhaps problem-solving because they're quieter, they're thinkers, they like to look at the facts and analyze things. They're very conscious of being right and being correct. This is very, very important to them. They may reach very good decisions, however, they will be slow to reach decisions, because they have to explore every element, every aspect of the subject they're working on. But they are decisive because they're highly analytical and come up with good results having looked at every detail. Sometimes they are uncomfortable with illogical people. They are facts and figures people. They are the thinkers. So emotional people tend to annoy them, we could say. They would like to have more logic surrounding them. And they are not really contact people. If you have people coming and hugging and touching and kissing and shaking hands and being overly enthusiastic and touchy-feely, then the thinker is not this kind of person. They tend to sort of move away from that situation. But of course, it depends on the degrees and the levels of the two dimensions of being indirect and controlling. Where do you fit in? If you are a thinker, where do you fit in here? Or indeed, if your boss is a thinker style, is this him? How can you work and do your business with someone of this style if you are something else? Start to think about that. So thinkers need to be right. They like to have organization about them and structure. They ask a lot of questions. They ask specifics. And they really like to get good answers. They are not kind to tolerate others unduly. So they do prefer to have more objective and more task-oriented work environments as well. This is very important for them, so that they can achieve the results that they wish to achieve. As I said, they need to understand the process, and they're very, very cautious. Cautious and not so relationship-oriented, meaning that they like to do things by themselves. They do prefer it that way, and they feel that they can get things done much, much quicker and better. Working slowly and precisely alone is how they wish to operate. So here we see that they are not relationship-oriented. They're not people-oriented to a high degree. They do tend to, because of their indirectedness, however, avoid conflict and like to think and contemplate and philosophize and draw opinions by themselves about certain things. Are you a thinker? Are you rigid about time? Do you like charts and graphics? Thinkers tend to be accountants and engineers, computer programmers, for example. A lot of IT companies have a lot of thinkers within those companies. physicians, mathematicians. These are all the thinker types, highly introspective and very analytical, and a little bit removed from the people-oriented side of things. So, how to find the balance? How do you find the balance if you are a thinker, and strongly a thinker? For balance, perhaps thinkers need to improve their decision-making, and they need to show concern for others. They need to try to make shortcuts so they get themselves out of being stuck in too much analysis of things and too many facts and figures. Sometimes that embeds you in a very rigid way of thinking and you can't see other things. So the idea is to find balance. The thinker needs to think more of other people and perhaps get involved in new projects where they are meeting other people and doing new things, rather than being stuck in the same system of things or the same project that they've been working on for some time. Also, to find balance, adjust more to disorganization and change. Get out of that comfort zone of being in a rigid environment. So leap out and take new initiatives and adjust a little bit more to things that can change. Push yourself to be in a changing environment. And in that way, you will be a little less rigid and a little less slow-paced. How are we doing? We've done the socializer, we've also done the director, and now we've done the thinker. Which one do you fall into? Where do you see yourself? And ask also, where do you see the people around you in your work environment, perhaps? And finally, we will come on to the relator style. Here we can see the relator style is perhaps the opposite of the director style. The relator style is supporting and indirect. They are the most people-oriented of all the four styles. They have very close personal relations with others. It's one of their most important objectives, and they totally dislike conflict. Sometimes that may be a weak point, however, because they won't confront conflict. But they have very good counseling skills, very good coaching skills, and they are excellent listeners. They are totally supportive of other people. They are very good coaches, relators. Excellent listeners, and they like good listeners as well. They certainly like to feel that they are amongst like-minded people and like-minded people with skills of their own ilk. They are concerned with stability. This is where the indirectness comes into it. They like stability, they like logic, they like documentation and facts as well. We have seen this in the indirectness dimension. And they are inclined to take action and do things quite slowly, needing a step-by-step approach or sequence to doing things. This explains their indirectness and their desire not to really take risks. They like to avoid risks, and changes that happen are quite concerning for them. So the relator is very much someone who needs to have personal involvement to reassure them that things are going okay as well. They try to accommodate others. They're very caring for other people and prefer tranquility and peace over conflict and too much argument going on around them. They seek security and they are very loyal employees, wanting to belong to a team, wanting to belong to a department, etc. And they enjoy teamwork very much. Is this you? Are you a relator? Is this your boss? Is he a relator? Start to think as we go through, because this is going to help you understand communication and dealing with people in your department or division. Get to know them and what their characteristics are, and you will know them very well and improve your communication ability with them. Relators are a little bit unassertive. They're warm and soft-hearted, and they are sometimes a little bit slow in taking action, as we said. However, they are very good trust builders, and any organization needs relators in their divisions and departments, because they build trust amongst all team players. They don't really like aggressive people. They don't really like pushy people, and they become very irritated by it. They are not direct, and they are not controlling. They're the other end of the spectrum. They're the opposite. So they're irritated by pushy people. The ideal occupations that a relator would have are counselling or teaching or social work or human resources development. These are excellent qualities, and they will be able to help anybody in those particular fields of business, most definitely. Primary strengths, we can say, are that relators are very caring and loving of others. This is one of their most known assets, and they are highly regarded for the fact that they are very caring people, and they are also very sensitive. Sometimes, though, a little bit too sensitive, as they get quite upset with things going on around them that they don't particularly like. So to find more balance, relators need to learn to say no, and to actually try to be a little bit more task-oriented and less sensitive. Quite simply, it's very good to be sensitive. However, too sensitive is not a good thing in business. And as we go through this, take a look at how to balance these different styles. Relators should be willing to reach from their comfort zone, from their very comfortable area that they live in, and to set goals and delegate goals to others, to get others to be more active, to be quicker in what they do. This is something that's very, very important, to find that balance. So we can see that there are 4 different styles here. The socializer, the director style, the thinker style, and the relator style. And each of these styles has very good strengths, and each of these styles has limitations. So finding a balance, finding the way that these things can be improved upon, is going to help you to become more effective in your communication. Your particular style is going to be reflected in the way you speak to people. Your style is going to be reflected in the way you deal with people in your personal life. So the 4 styles in business life are summarized in these next slides. Socializers are risk takers and act quickly, and they're decisive. Directors, as we can see, like others to be decisive, efficient, receptive and intelligent. That's what they like and that's what they expect. Thinkers, they like other people to be credible, professional, sincere and courteous. This is important for them. And relators, what do they like in business? What do they want with their business colleagues? They like others to be courteous and friendly, with sharing responsibilities with them. These are the 4 different styles. In social life, we can see that the socializers like others to be spontaneous, we can say, and entertaining. Have no inhibitions. To be quite free about how they enjoy their life. The directors, they like people to be assertive and clever, and they like others to have a sense of humour. The thinkers, they like others to be pleasant and sincere. This is what they need, and this is important to them. So we can see that there are differences in what different styles require. The relators like others to be with real personalities and friendly. The relators, as we know, are the most people-oriented of all of the styles. So let's take it as a summary and at a final glance of these different styles. So you can see quite clearly. Relator, relationship oriented. Moves, acts, speaks slowly. Wants tranquility and peace, enjoys teamwork, has good counseling skills. The socializer, relationship oriented as well. Moves, acts and speaks quickly. Risk taker, wants excitement and change. Enjoys the spotlight and has good persuasive skills, good influencing skills. The thinker and the director, both of these are task-oriented. One, the thinker moves and acts and speaks slowly, whereas the director is much, much quicker. He's more direct. The thinker wants to be accurate. The director wants to be in charge. Quite simply, that's what he wants. The thinker enjoys solitary intellectual work, but the director gets results through others. He just wants things to be done. The thinker is cautious in making decisions, the director quick in making decisions, and finally the thinker is very good at problem-solving skills because he's very analytical. The director is a great administrator, very fast to get people organized. So here we find these different types, the 4 different types. So just a few notes before we leave. If you are a director, how do you adapt yourself if you are a director? You need to lower your emphasis on the control of other people. That's very important. That's something you need to look at. Secondly, you need to develop and demonstrate more supportive skills, such as listening and questioning and positive reinforcement. You need to get in touch with people. Quite simply, in a nutshell, that's what you need to do in order to adapt. If you are a socializer, what can you do to adapt? You need to lower your emphasis on the need for approval from other people or groups. You need to lower that, and you need to develop and demonstrate more active skills, more assertive skills, more conflict resolution and negotiation skills. You need to get out there and assert yourself a bit more. That will be important for you to adapt. If you are a relator, okay, here, you need to lower your emphasis on resistance to try new things. Okay, that's something that you have to get out of. You have to jump out of that comfort zone and try new things. And in terms of developing and demonstrating different skills, you need to be more directive. And you have to take a bit more action in doing things rather than waiting and being more people-oriented. This is something that you're going to have to do in order to adapt yourself. And finally, adapting yourself if you are a thinker. Don't try to be so perfect. That's something you need to lower your emphasis on. Too much perfection and the tendency to focus on, you do really need to stop focusing on being perfect in everything. Lighten up and look at your strengths in other ways. Develop more supportive skills because you're more of a controller. So you need to develop skills such as empathy and listening and positive reinforcement and involvement with others. This is a way that you can adapt your behaviors in your workplace to the people around you.